A quiet knock started the collapse. I opened the door in my paint-splattered hoodie and found a courier holding a manila envelope, thick with copies, tabs, and a neon sticker that said, "Signature required." The return address was a local credit union I had never used. I live in Portland, Oregon, in a second-floor walk-up off S.E. Belmont, above a bookstore that still smells like dust and vanilla. I'm 33, a furniture restorer by trade, a small business owner by stubborn choice, and a weekend cyclist by sanity. 2 years ago, I co-founded a studio called Hearthgrain with a guy I used to trust more than my landlord. We specialized in custom pieces from reclaimed hardwood, ash slab dining tables, maple end grain cutting boards, walnut credenzas with dovetail drawers that could make you weep if you love joinery like I do. My passion project is a set of chairs modeled after a 1930s Danish design I saw in a faded photograph at an estate sale. I've been chasing their curve for months, steaming and bending slats until my shop looked like a sauna for ghosts. The guy was my business partner, at least on paper. Ethan Cross, 35, from Boise by way of Houston, the sort of tall that gets him mistaken for an ex-college basketball player with a smile that made vendors knock a couple percentage points off our invoices. Ethan could charm Alder into pretending it was walnut. He handled sales, social media, and the clients who said they wanted mid-century vibes, like that meant anything before we translated it into proportions and grain direction. The first time we met, he'd brought me coffee and a short stack of Polaroids of the built-ins he'd done on the side, clean, confident. His references spoke in paragraph form. Still, looking back, there were hints. He never gave exact numbers unless he'd rounded them up, and he always rounded up. His phone lived on Do Not Disturb. He used phrases like, "We'll reconcile later," and "You got to spend money to make money," as if they were safety harnesses, not slogans you wear when you're falling. I should have seen the red flags in all the green lights. We set up Hearthgrain as an LLC in April 2023. 60-40 split in my favor, since I brought the tools, the space, and the backlog of commissions. Our operating agreement spelled out who could sign contracts, what counted as a major expense, and how we'd pay ourselves. Modest draws on the 1st and 15th. We opened a business checking account at On Point Community Credit Union on SE Grand. Account ending in 7742, plus a business savings with a laughable 0.5% APY. We kept a shared Google Drive and a Slack with 3 channels, clients, shop, and ops. It felt grown up until it didn't. The courier's envelope that morning in March 2025 had a different logo. River West Credit Union, 4235 SE Hawthorne BLVD. Inside, a notice of default dated March 12, 2025, 8:47 a.m., certified number RWCU port ND 03819. It said Hearthgrain LLC owed $148,000 on a line of credit opened August 9, 2024, at 3:22 p.m., loan number ending 1039, secured by business assets, fixtures, accounts receivable, and equipment listed on Schedule A. Schedule A read like a printed inventory of my soul. Powermatic table saw, 3 HP, serial PM668742. Lie Nielsen number 4 smoothing plane, Grizzly G0490X jointer, Festool Domino DF 500. 3 custom jigs I built myself, described with the kind of detail you only get from someone who has stood in that room. The signature at the bottom? Mine. Or a pretty good version of mine. At 9:11 a.m., I texted Ethan, "Got a weird letter? Did you open a line at River West?" He replied at 9:13, "We talked about expanding last summer. You're welcome. Don't freak, I've got a plan. A plan." The last time he'd said that he'd triple booked us on coffee tables and had to borrow my cousin's garage. I called him, straight to voicemail. I tried again. Straight to voicemail. My stomach did that elevator drop thing you get when someone you love does something dangerous and calls it growth. We had 4 major projects on the calendar: a walnut conference table for Stride Co., a marketing agency on SW 10th, due April 30th, a set of white oak bookshelves for a law firm on N.E. Irving, due May 15, 2 ash and steel bench sets for a restaurant opening in June on NW 23rd, and the crown jewel, a live edge maple dining table for an architect named Lucia in Lake Oswego. Deposit paid, design approved, delivery window May 1 to 10. Our projected revenue through June was $117,800, with material costs estimated at $34,600. We'd cleared my queue from 2023 and were finally catching our rhythm. But the notice of default said we'd missed the last 3 payments on the line of credit. It listed late fees, $890, $890, $890. Accrued interest to date, $5,412. 48. Current balance, $148,000 even, which told me someone had written that number with a round number in mind. I walked to the shop on SE 7th, a cinderblock rectangle with roll-up doors and a skylight that turns the sawdust gold at 3 p.m. The lock clicked like always. Inside, the green paint of the Grizzly jointer looked too cheerful. On my bench, a spiral-bound notebook lay open to a shop to-do list in my handwriting. Flatten Lucia's slabs, call Tim at Alder Cibar for the new shipment, sharpen the chisels. Under that, someone had doodled a dollar sign in a speech bubble. Ethan's humor was always a little on the nose. I pulled the manila envelope back out and compared the signature to my driver's license photocopy we kept for vendor files. Close but off. Whoever did it missed the small lift before the second T. They dragged it straight through, like I did when I was rushing in high school. The notary stamp was neat, too neat, the initials EC at the bottom of the notary line, which made me feel like I was hallucinating. At 10:32 a.m., I drove to River West on Hawthorne. The lobby smelled like lemon cleaner and a bowl of wrapped mints staled 6 months ago. I asked for a loan officer and got a woman named Autumn, with the kind of calm you usually only see in librarians and ICU nurses. I set the notice of default on her desk. I didn't sign this, I said, and if I did, I want to see when and how. She pulled it up, typed, then frowned in a way that said she was rearranging her face to keep it neutral. The file shows 2 signatories, you and an authorized co-owner, Mr. Cross. She turned her screen slightly so I could see. Up popped scanned pages, a resolution authorizing a line of credit, operating agreement excerpts, a certificate of authority with our LLC name, and the State of Oregon seal. The Schedule A, a signature page with my name in printed block letters under a slanted signature that wore my name like a costume. Can I get copies? I asked. She pointed to the notice. You should have received a packet when the loan funded. We didn't take this loan, I said. He took it. Autumn tapped the spacebar, scrolled. There are draws here. 20,000 on August 12th, 2024, 35,000 on September 5th, 18,000 on October 23rd, 25,000 on November 18th, 30,000 on December 9th, 20,000 on January 7th, 2025. All to the Hearthgrain business account ending in 7742, and then out to vendors. Which vendors? I asked, though the names already formed like a fever in the back of my skull. She listed them, reading from the screen. Northwest Steel Fab, 14,680. Alder Cumber Timber, 21,405. Portland Tool Supply, 9,612. Zenith Marketing Group, 17,000. And, she paused. Crosco Enterprises, 33,000. I don't know Crosco, I said, even as I imagined the logo Ethan had once sketched in a notebook, chuckling about having a real holding company one day. The statement history continued like a ledger written by a ghost with my handwriting. It wasn't that the expenses were impossible, it was that I hadn't authorized them. We had purchased steel for the restaurant benches and a second Festool track saw after the first one started screeching. But Zenith, we'd never paid a marketing firm more than $2,000, and Crosco was a confession, not a company. At 11:19 a.m., I asked Autumn to print everything she legally could with my name on it. She did, stapling like a person who understands lawsuits. She even highlighted the notary's signature with EC on it and typed the notary's name into a little search bar that gave only a license number and an address in Selwood, 8705 SE 13th Ave, Suite 103. She slid the stack to me with a face that was no longer neutral. If your signature was forged, she said quietly, you'll want to contact the police. And your bank. My bank, I repeated, right. On the drive back to the shop, I called OnPoint. A nice guy named Rick in business services looked up our account and said the draws had come in from River West and gone out within 2 days to the listed vendors via ACH and cashier's checks. All checks had the required signatures, Rick said. Whose signatures? I asked. He hesitated. Looks like both of yours, Mr. Tate. I stared at the light at SE 12th and Hawthorne as if I could hold it red forever. I need copies of those checks, I said, front and back, and the ACH authorizations. I can email them by end of day, Rick said. Email them now, I said, and gave him my address. 11:43 a.m. By 12:10 p.m., I was at the shop printer, spitting out front and backs of checks with signatures that looked like mine, and with Ethan's looping E like a lasso. On the ACH authorizations, the authorization box had a cropped version of my signature that, when I zoomed in on the PDF, showed pixels where there should have been ink. It looked pasted. Because it was. He'd lifted it from a W9 we'd sent a client and dropped it onto a form like a sticker. As for the notary, the ink looked too dark, the stamp too crisp. The notary ID belonged to EC. Whitaker, which could be a person or a phantom. At 12:32 p.m., I finally got Ethan on the phone. He sounded busy. He always sounded busy, as if he were building a house while jogging. I'm at the steel shop, he said. Can I call you later? You forged my signature, I said, each word its own plank. He exhaled like he'd been expecting this door to open eventually. Don't be dramatic, Lucas. We talked about a line last summer. You were fine with it in principle. I wasn't fine with you opening it without me. Or paying yourself through Crosco. That's a vendor, he said. I did consulting. For who? I asked. For us? For the brand, he said, the word brand stretching like gum. I brought in the Stride job. The architect connection? That's me. You get paid for your hours in the shop. I get paid for sales. That was the deal. That is not the deal, I said. The deal is in the operating agreement you initialed on page 4. You're being small, he said, and something in me went quiet. When someone calls you small while standing on your shoulders, the only winning move is to step away. Bring me the River West packet, I said. Today, 4 p.m., at the shop. Can't, he said. I'm... 4, I said, and hung up. At 1:05 p.m., I called our attorney, a woman named Marissa Diaz we'd hired last year to look over a lease. She answered on the second ring. I gave her the short version. She took a breath that sounded like a file folder opening in her head. Email me everything, she said. We'll do 3 things. Freeze what you can, document what you can't, and stop the bleeding. Change the locks on the shop. Call your bank to require dual approval on all transfers. If he shows up at 4, you'll have a witness. If he doesn't, we go to court for an emergency injunction tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. Multnomah County Circuit Court, 1200 SWW 1st Ave. I don't want to blow up our business, I said, but the word our tasted like tinfoil. You're not blowing it up, she said. You're taking the match out of his hand. At 1:36 p.m., I drove to Park Rose Hardware and bought 2 Schlage deadbolts, keyed different, receipt 471982, 86, 14 after tax. At 2:10 p.m., I installed them with the quiet violence of someone who needs a result. At 2:47, I called OnPoint again and set dual approval on wires and ACH, new daily transfer limits, and text alerts on anything above 500. Rick said he was sorry. I told him it wasn't his fault. At 3:08, I exported everything from QuickBooks and Google Drive into a Dropbox folder labeled Hearthgrain Dispute. At 3:26, I printed the operating agreement, highlighting sections 5, 2, and 6. 1. About major expenditures and signature authority. I put them in a blue folder next to the roll-up door. Ethan showed at 4:18 p.m., sunglasses, sneakers that cost too much, and a winter coat that still had creases from the store. He looked at the new locks and laughed like we were trying to outprank each other with April Fool's jokes. "You changed the locks?" he said. "I did," I said. "And I called Marissa." He spread his hands. "We're on the same team." "Teams don't forge signatures," I said. He stepped closer, the way guys do when they're about to insist on a truth they want you to swallow whole. "I built the pipeline," he said. "I handled clients. You sanded. You deserve a chance to return the packet and explain why Crossco shows up on our bank statements," I said calmly, because anger is a poor carpenter. It cuts crooked. "You deserve a chance to say whether the notary you used is you, E.C. Whitaker. Is that your middle name?" He rolled his eyes. "You're making this weird." "You made it criminal," I said, and set the blue folder on the bench between us like a line. "Here's the operating agreement. Here are the sections. Here's the River West default. I need you to sign this." I slid a template Marissa had emailed an hour earlier, a rescission and acknowledgement we could attach to any communication with River West. It said he'd opened the line without my knowledge, and that all drawers related to Crossco were unauthorized. It wasn't a confession. It was a hand on a lever. Ethan touched the paper as if it might stain him. "I'll talk to River West," he said. "They know me." "They don't know you," I said. "They know a signature that looks like mine." He didn't sign. He took his sunglasses off, looked at me with the softness he used when coaxing a vendor to extend net 30 terms. "Don't do this, Lucas," he said. "Not to me." I held his gaze for a beat longer than I wanted to. Then I lifted the remote and rolled the shop door down halfway. The half-light made his face look carved. "You have until tonight at 8, I said. "Email me the packet and a written statement. Otherwise, at 9 a.m. tomorrow, I file." He stepped back, then forward, then back again, like someone rehearsing an exit. He left without taking the paper. The door rattled as the cold came in. At 7:42 p.m., I got my first message from an unknown number. "You're overreacting. At 7:58, we'll fix it if you stop making it a thing. At 9:13, if you go to court, I'll tell them you knew. At 11:27, you owe me. At 12:04 a.m., a photo of our shop in the dark, taken from across SE 7th. The caption, "Don't lock me out of my own life." I didn't sleep. I made coffee at 2 a.m., black and bitter, and wrote out a timeline on legal pads like I was rebuilding a house in pencil. August 9th, line opened. August 12th, first drawer. September 5th, October 23rd, November 18th, December 9th, January 7th. Subsequent draws. March 12th, notice of default. March 13th, me at River West. March 14th, me installing locks. Each entry got a list of supporting documents, email, PDF, photo. The legal pad filled up with a neatness that wasn't calm, but felt like it from the outside. At 8:30 a.m., I met Marissa at her office at 1211 SW 5th Ave, Suite 900, all glass and plants. She wore black like a uniform. We filed a petition for a temporary restraining order and an emergency injunction. Case number 25CV 17304. She asked for an order preventing Ethan from entering the premises, accessing accounts, contacting clients, or representing himself as Hearthgrain. We attached 72 pages of exhibits. The clerk stamped the packet at 9:06 a.m. The hearing was set for 11:30 a.m. before Judge Allard in courtroom 5C. At 9:43 a.m., we called River West from her conference room. Autumn joined, plus a compliance officer named Harold, whose voice sounded like a binder. Marissa spoke with a softness that cut. "We believe the signature was forged," she said, "and that a notary stamp was misused. We're notifying law enforcement." Harold cleared his throat. "We'll open an internal review," he said. "We'll pause collections for 14 days pending outcome." "Send that pause in writing," Marissa said. He agreed. At 10:01, my phone chimed with a PDF. Temporary hold loan, 1039. 14 days was a dot of sure, but it was sure. At 10:30 a.m., Ethan started calling. I let it ring. He texted, "You're killing us." Then, "I'll bring the packet." Then, "I'm outside your attorney's building." That last one had a photo of the lobby directory. He was there. The warmth in my face turned to ice in my fingers. "Security," Marissa said, and pressed a button on her phone like a pianist. A guard named Julio came up. We waited. Ethan never made it to the suite. At 11:29 a.m., we took our seats in 5C. The benches were polished, and the clock on the wall ticked loudly enough to hear the minutes move. Ethan came in with a lawyer I'd never met, a guy in a blue suit who looked like he slept in a tie. Judge Allard listened for 20 minutes. I talked about the shop, the line of credit, and the checks. Marissa handed up copies. Ethan's lawyer argued that the operating agreement allowed Ethan to engage in ordinary course expenditures, and that the line of credit was ordinary for a growing business. Judge Allard raised an eyebrow the way I raise a plane to a knot. "Ordinary expenditures do not include forging signatures," she said. "Temporary restraining order granted." She tapped her pen, signed, and told us to return in 2 weeks with more paper. I walked out into the March glare, feeling like I'd ridden a roller coaster without a lap bar. At 1:12 p.m., I filed a police report at the Central Precinct, 1111 SW 2nd Ave, report number 25345781. I gave the officer a copy of the notary stamp and the Crossco payments. He typed my words into a system that tried to auto-correct my life. Then came the fallout. Clients are not just revenue lines, they're people with calendars and expectations and reputations of their own. I called them all that afternoon. At 2:03 p.m., I called Stride Coates and spoke to Eliza, the project manager with the yellow legal pad I admired the first time we met. I told her we were restructuring and that all timelines would be met. She said they'd already been contacted by someone from Hearthgrain that morning who told them the project was on hold due to internal disputes and suggested they redirect their deposit. She used quotes. I told her that someone no longer represented us. I emailed her the court order at 2:17 p.m. She replied at 2:23 p.m. We're with you, Lucas. Keep us posted. At 2:45 p.m., I called Lucia the architect. She answered from a site visit in Lake Oswego where men were arguing about slab placement. I don't care about your drama, she said, in a voice that somehow wasn't unkind. I care about my table. Will it be ready? It will, I said, and I meant it the way a person means survival. I sent her a revised schedule with dates. March 20th, slabs flattened. March 25, epoxy fill. March 28, final sanding. April, first base assembly. May 4, delivery at 10 a.m. I attached photos of her slabs on my shop floor with a tape measure for scale and the day's newspaper at the corner because my dad taught me that truth needs a timestamp. At 3:10 p.m., the law firm on N.E. Irving called me first. Their administrator, a man named Simon with a voice like crisp paper, said a man had shown up in their lobby at 2:50 p.m. and told the receptionist he was collecting a final payment for the shelf install. Our payment was not due. I told him to call security if the man returned. Then I added a note. Ethan was escalating from texts to surprise appearances at clients' offices. I told myself to breathe. By 4:02 p.m., I had the shop computers disconnected from Google Drive and QuickBooks Online. I set up a new email address for clients that only I controlled, lucashearthgrainstudio.com. I called our lumber supplier Alder Co. and asked to speak to Tim, who said, "Hey buddy," and then went quiet when I told him what happened. "We'll hold your order," he said, "and we'll keep an eye out." Ethan called earlier about a fresh account. At 6:19 p.m., I received an email from a Proton Mail address that read, "Take the TRO and shove it. I built this with you." I flagged it and forwarded to Marissa with the subject line, "Stalking Day 1." At 8:01 p.m., a car idled outside the shop, lights off. I took a photo from the upstairs office window that showed a dark sedan and the edge of a license plate. I didn't go outside. I called the non-emergency number and reported a vehicle loitering. File note added to my report. When you live inside a story like this, you learn to think like a detective even when your hands still smell like mineral oil. In the days that followed, Ethan went loud. He posted on Instagram from the Hearthgrain account on March 16th at 9:07 a.m. "Due to internal restructuring, we're pausing commissions." The caption said the decision was mutual and used a photo of our maple slabs like a hostage letter. I had already changed passwords, but he'd found a way in through a saved browser on the shop iMac I forgot about. I deleted the post at 9:15 a.m. and put two-factor on everything. Under the photo of my chair prototypes I'd posted the week before, a dozen comments appeared in an hour, half of them from accounts that looked new. Bots or friends with time on their hands. I posted an update at 9:22 with a photo of the TRO, cropped to remove sensitive info, and a caption, "We had to do a hard thing to protect our clients and our work. Deliveries will continue as promised." The comments turned supportive or quiet. People like a craftsman under siege more than they like a salesman in a suit with a ghost company. The notary unraveling happened faster than I expected. On March 18th, a detective named Rena Morales called to say they'd visited the address on the notary stamp. Suite 103 was a mailbox store. E.C. Whitaker did not exist in the Oregon notary database. The stamp was fake or borrowed. That turned a civil mess into a criminal one. Detective Morales asked for a statement. I gave it to her in person, 4:30 p.m., her recorder on the table between us, the red light blinking like a metronome for truth. She asked if I feared for my safety. I said, "I fear for my timeline." Then I added, "and for the clients he's contacting." She nodded like someone who has seen worse and knows that doesn't make this better. Escalation looks like small things stacked into a wall. On March 19th at 7:06 a.m., someone stuck a flyer to the shop door with a staple gun. "Hearthgrain is a fraud, Google it." I took a photo before removing it and saved it in a folder called Harassment. On March 20th, a burner IG account sent me a DM with a photo of me locking my bike on SE 7th. Caption, "Nice wheels." I blocked and reported. I also installed 2 Nest cameras at the shop entrance and back alley. Serials NC4201 and NC4202, receipts saved. On March 21st at 11:13 p.m., my phone lit with 12 texts from an unknown number in 2 minutes, all saying variations of "talk to me." I set my phone to filter unknown senders and slept for the first time like a human, not a cornered animal. The positive turn came from a direction I didn't expect. A chef named Amy Laurent, 31, born in Lyon, raised in Chicago, newly in Portland, to open a neighborhood place on NE, Alberta, called Cassis. She'd reached out in January about stools for her bar and a butcher block for the pass. We'd met once in February in her empty space, paint buckets everywhere, a line of sunlight on the concrete floor like a promise. I had admired her menu draft handwritten, smudged with curry oil. When I called on March 22nd to explain the situation, she cut me off. "You told me you'd deliver by April 12th, she said. "That's still true." "Yes," I said. "Then I don't care who's mad at who," she said. "I care that the stools don't wobble." We met at her restaurant at 8 a.m. the next morning. She brought coffee in paper cups with no lids and 2 croissants that had lost their crisp. We walked the space and measured the bar height, 42 inches exactly, talked about footrests and seat angles, and then she asked how I got into this kind of work. I told her about my grandfather in Ohio, a man who could fix anything with a nail and a prayer, and how I'd fallen in love with wood before I fell in love with anyone. She listened like someone hanging a picture and making sure it was level. When we finished, she said, "I can't help you with court, but I can feed you." It was both a promise and a recipe. On March 24th, River West's compliance officer called to say they'd confirmed irregularities in the documentation and were referring the matter to their fraud team. "This is separate from the criminal complaint," he said, as if saying so could keep the worlds from touching. They extended the collections pause to 30 days and said they were placing a hold on Crossco's receiving account at Pacific West Bank, account ending 3210, pending verification. I thanked him and then called Marissa, who said one word: good. The hearings moved like court always moves, faster than your heart, but slower than your fear. On March 28th, we presented the bank statements highlighting Crossco transfers totaling $33,000, plus a fresh $7,500 pending on March 10th that hadn't cleared when the hold went in. Ethan's lawyer argued again that Ethan had authority in the ordinary course of business. Judge Allard read the contract language aloud. Section 6, 1 requiring both signatures for any line of credit, and then looked at the fake notary stamp for a long time. "Temporary injunction granted," she said. "Through May 15th, pending resolution or further order." Ethan stopped trying to charm me after that. He shifted to threats delivered via proximity. I'd find him outside the shop at 7 a.m., leaning against a lamppost, or he'd appear in the grocery store aisle, staring at the rows of eggs like he'd forgotten why people eat. Once, on April 2nd at 6:50 p.m., he showed up at my apartment building and rang my buzzer for 5 minutes straight. I didn't open the door. I filmed the hall camera feed on my phone and sent it to Marissa and Detective Morales. Morales called it pattern of harassment. I called it Tuesday. Meanwhile, I worked. Work is what saves you when nothing else is under your control. I flattened Lucia's slabs on March 20th, epoxy fill on March 23rd, sanded to 220 grit on March 26th, glued the breadboard ends on March 29th, and did the first coat of Rubio monocoat on March 31st. On April 4th, I fabricated the steel trestle base with my friend Jonah in his garage on SE 50th, cutting 3K1 rectangular tube with a gusset angle you could trust with a family. I logged every hour in a spreadsheet named Project Lucia Hours, XLS, a relic of my early days when naming was hope. I sent progress photos every Friday at 5 p.m., with my face in the corner of one shot to prove the date. She replied with "looks beautiful" and the occasional question about table height. It felt like medicine. On April 12th, Amy's stools rolled out of the shop like recruits. 8 stools, 30-inch seat height, oak seats with a concave dish, steel frames clear-coated to resist the hands of strangers. We delivered them at 3 p.m. to Cassis, 4123 NE, Alberta, and she paid the invoice at 3:11 p.m., $4,960, invoice HG 154, paid via bank transfer, confirmation ONPTTR 51208. She made us a staff meal from an empty fridge, omelettes with chèvre and chives, a salad of shaved fennel, bread toasted directly on the gas flame. When she slid me a plate, she said, "Eat while it's hot." And look at the line of the bar now. The line was perfect. You measure your life by the numbers you choose. For a month, mine were dates on filings and grit on sandpaper. Then, on May 4th at 9:48 a.m., I strapped Lucia's table into the van with ratchet straps that snapped tight like applause. We delivered at 10:07 a.m. to 1734 North Shore RD, Lake Oswego. Her living room had a wall of windows and a rug that made you walk softer. We placed the table by the window. She ran her fingers over the edge like she was reading it. "It's good," she said, and handed me a check for the final payment, $7,800. I put the check in a folder, took a photo of us by the table, and another of the underside with the hearth-grain stamp I'd made with a brass punch. I drove back to Portland with the kind of relief that doesn't have a sound. The legal part wound towards clarity. River West's fraud team concluded their review on May 6th. Based on the documentation provided and internal assessments, we find material irregularities in the loan initiation concerning one signatory's authorization. We will pursue remedies with the responsible party and remove the obligation from the non-authorizing party. It was written like a machine that didn't want to point a finger, but did anyway. Practically, it meant they carved me out of the debt. They also placed a formal fraud hold on Crossco's account and referred the matter to the DA. Detective Morales called to say the DA was evaluating charges: forgery, identity theft, and aggravated theft. She asked if I wanted to be notified of court dates. I said yes, even though part of me wanted to build a chair so beautiful it erased his name entirely. Ethan's last big gesture came on May 9th. He sent an email to every client we'd ever had, BCC list visible like a scar, with the subject line, "The Truth About Hearthgrain." It was 4 paragraphs of accusations. That I was the one who pushed for the loan, that he'd paid for my tools, that I'd threatened him. He attached cropped screenshots where my words had been cut mid-sentence and a PDF of the operating agreement with the signature page missing. He CC'd a reporter from an alt weekly. My phone buzzed like it was trying to run away from me. I replied once, 3 sentences. Please see attached court documents and bank statements. A judge has issued an injunction against Mr. Cross regarding access to our accounts, premises, and clients. Deliveries continue as scheduled. I attached the TRO, the injunction, and River West's letter. I blind copied Marissa, then I closed my laptop and went downstairs to sweep. The broom on concrete is a sound that will outlast gossip. The reporter called at 3:10 p.m. I told her I'd talk if we could meet in person. We met at Albina Press at 4 p.m. I brought a folder. She brought a small recorder and the weary look of someone who's seen too many feuds over too little. I told her my story without adjectives. She asked what I wanted out of all this. I said, to get back to work. The story never ran. Maybe it never mattered enough. Maybe the documents told a tale without a headline. By late May, the shop felt like itself again. The smell of oil, the way light hit the dust. The radio on low. Amy opened Cassie on May 28th, a soft launch that felt like a party held by adults who actually know what they're doing. She put my stools in the corner by the window where the afternoon catches people's hair. She stood beside me in her kitchen and handed me a plate like a benediction. Seared halibut, peas with mint, a lemon sabayon that made me get quiet. How's your case? She asked. Moving, I said. And you? She asked. Also moving, I said, and she smiled with her eyes, which is how you know a person has learned to trust what can't be put on paper. Ethan pleaded not guilty at his first appearance in June. The judge set conditions: no contact with me, no proximity within 200 feet of the shop or my apartment. He violated it within a week by walking past the shop during lunch. I sent the security clip to Detective Morales. She wrote it up. The system is slow until it isn't. On June 19th, the DA added a contempt charge. He stopped hovering after that. If this were a neat story, I'd say he apologized. He did not. He sent one last message via his lawyer in July, a proposal to buy out my interest with money that did not exist. We declined. I offered to buy his 40% for one, contingent on a full release and his signature on an agreement promising to never use the Hearthgrain name. He didn't sign. Then August came, and with it a heat that made glue misbehave. I started dating Amy in a way that didn't have a beginning so much as a continuation. After a staff meal, during a late Sunday when she was testing a new vinaigrette, after I tightened a footrest on a stool because a customer rocked too hard. She liked that I could make a dovetail that seated with a sigh. I liked that she could make a salad taste like a memory. We took the kind of drives people take when they live in Oregon and want to be reminded of scale. We talked about work the way people talk about weather, caring without being owned by it. She asked me once, "Do you miss him?" I thought about the early days, the way we'd load slabs together in the rain and laugh like we were building something that would outlast us. I miss the promise, I said, not the man. The injunction became permanent in September, and the civil suit settled on terms I can't disclose, except to say that Hearthgrain is mine, fully, and that sometimes the cleanest line isn't the prettiest cut, but it's the one that keeps the board from splitting. River West recovered a portion of the money from Crossco's frozen account, and the rest will be a story about restitution that lives in someone else's file. The last time I saw Ethan was December 3rd at 5:20 p.m. in the parking lot of the Fred Meyer on S.E. Hawthorne. He didn't see me. He was carrying a roll of gift wrap and a case of beer, his mouth set in a line like a man calculating a new plan. I watched him for a moment, the way you watch a stranger in a crowd, curious until you aren't. Sometimes I think about the first time he walked into my shop and laid his Polaroids down like cards. How bright that day was, how willing I was to believe that two people with the same hunger could share a table without fighting over the last bite. December in Portland is a soft grey. It takes the edges off things. Amy and I put up a tree in the corner of my apartment that smelled like every winter I've survived. I hung a small wooden ornament shaped like a plane, the kind you push and it sings. She asked me once if I'd ever forgive him. I said forgiveness is a piece of furniture you build for yourself. You can invite someone to sit, but you don't have to. The hook of this story was a knock. The twist is not a twist so much as a mirror. Ethan once told me I'd forget him in a week when we argued about a client who wanted a discount we couldn't afford. I thought about that as I locked the shop one night in January and listened to the click settle into the door. He said he'd forget me in a week, but I'm the one who forgot him.